One. So today we have a very exciting guest, Tawhid. And Tawhid right now is a staff software engineer at IBM, but he has also worked as a software engineer at Samsung, Meta, also Amazon, right? And he's also founded his startup. And this episode, like last time we talked, you had a really interesting story. You lived in Japan for in your childhood, and then you weren't even a computer science major, but you're in software engineering. You transitioned from engineering, like just non-related CS to CS stuff, and I just find that very interesting. But let's get back to when you were like a very little child. And so, were you in Bangladesh or were you in Japan? Like, how did it all start?
Yeah, so a little bit of my family background. So I was born in Bangladesh in Dhaka. And when I was around 4 or 5, I moved to Japan because of my parents.
Yeah.
So my dad's a mechanical engineer and my mom's a scientist. She does research in the biomedical field. And she got a PhD offer at the city in Japan called Tokushima. It's a small city near Osaka. So we had to move there while my mom did her PhD. And I was basically in Japan from around 4 or 5, I think around pre K or kindergarten at that age to fourth grade, so around 5 years. And yeah, I've always loved engineering and building stuff because of my family's background. They're both STEM. They instilled in me like a love of science, math, physics. Since I was little, I love learning how like things work and like how to make stuff. My dad would randomly ask me, random questions like how does a car engine work or how does an airplane fly, and stuff like that just piqued my curiosity, and I just wanted to learn more about how everything worked. And ever since I was like elementary school aged, I love playing with stuff like Legos or modifying like remote controlled airplanes. So I always knew I would be some type of an engineer where I would make stuff using science and math. And I decided around, I think, middle school or high school that I would be an aerospace engineer building rockets and spaceships because I felt like in terms of engineering, making rockets and airplanes is like like as good as it's gonna get. It's like the pinnacle of engineering. It's like the coolest stuff you could do going to outer space. But I think senior year, I realized that if I became like an aerospace engineer, the aerospace jobs are limited. So like you have to go to like NASA or like Boeing. It's very limited. So you have to be in like certain cities. And I realized if I were like a different type of engineer, I could just work from like any city. So that would be better for me and my family. So I decided I would do an electrical engineering major in college because other than aerospace, I loved electronics and robotics, stuff like that, playing with circuits, computers. When I was little, I would take apart computers or do some coding, things like that on computers. So that was also something I liked. So I started my undergrad at this college called RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. It's in Troy, New York. It's in upstate. And I started out as an electrical engineering major. And then my transition to CS started when my freshman year at RPI, I took this Python coding class, and I just really loved that class. Other than compared to my other classes in engineering, I just enjoyed how you could just code something and then like just the process of coding and executing that code. It was just something that I really enjoyed, and I decided I would do a dual major. So I would add a computer engineering major in addition to my electrical engineering major. So basically, in college, I learned both hardware and software, and that's how my journey started in CS and the world of coding and technology.
Yeah. And seems like you had an inclination towards the engineering, CS, like all these tech stuff from the very beginning, and that led you to become the person you are today. That being said, I still want to know a lot more about like your experience in Japan because
Yeah, yeah.
how many more Bengalis like there's not that many Bengalis I know that are in Japan, right? So if you had to take a guess, how many Bengalis are in Japan today, or like back when you were there?
In all of Japan, I have no idea. It could be maybe like thousands because I know recently in big cities like Tokyo, there are a lot of Bengalis. There's a strong Bengali community there. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, I mean, it's not like New York City, but there's like neighborhoods with like Bengali people, stuff like that. I've heard, but this was like 20 years ago or 15 years ago in Japan. I was in like a small city, not even like a big city like
Yeah.
Tokyo or Osaka. And in that city, it was mostly well, the only foreigners in that city were people doing research or PhD at that university my mom did her PhD at. So there were a couple other Bengalis in that city. I don't know, if I had to take a guess, maybe like I guess like 50 total Bengali people, or
Wow.
25, like not that many, maybe
Yeah.
like a couple of families, I guess. That's how I would put it in that city.
And how many people live total in that town or city?
It was a small city, so
Yeah,
compared to like American version, I would say it's like a small or a medium-sized city, kind of like Albany, if you've been to Albany before.
I see. I see. So, and you said you were there from like kindergarten to maybe fourth grade.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
elementary
how
school.
was the school life in Japan as a Bengali?
Yeah, well, I would say first as a just the overall culture of Japan, it's very different from US because
Yeah,
US is like a pretty new country. It's been around for like 300 years and it's always been a melting pot of immigrants. But Japan, it's like a 2,000-year-old culture where it's only been for Japanese people. So
yeah,
they're very polite, but they're also skeptical of immigrants and
mm,
outsiders in general. So
mm,
yeah, so growing up in Japan, the school life, I would say it was very different from Bangladesh or US. So I've never
yeah,
actually been to Bangladesh, but so I don't know what the school is like there, but I know that in Bangladesh, school focuses a lot on like math and science and rote learning, so you memorize formulas and things like that. And that's also similar case in US, but there's more holistic approach where you have to do like to get into college, you have to do like extracurricular stuff in addition to those things. But in Japan, the way school worked is the very first thing you learn in school. It's uh, what's the English word for it? I'd say it's like civic education. So like manners and how to behave in society. So it's
yeah,
very unique culture. So what they do is when you like start out school, right, when you're in kindergarten, first grade, they focused on building good manners among the students and how to work together. So in the US it's all about like an individualistic culture, but in Japan it's about collectivism and working together and how you can fit in society. So I remember in like kindergarten and first grade, we would be the students themselves, we would be serving lunch to like the other kids. So like they would
yeah.
bring out the trays and we would be serving them out, and then after that we'd be cleaning it up, and then in the afternoon before we went home, we all had to like sweep and like mop the floor of the classroom. So we would all like learn how to work together and how to like get good manners and stuff like that before we even started actually learning like math or reading or stuff like that. So that was very unique.
Yeah.
um you want me to continue or?
Yeah, you can continue.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, other than that, yeah, as a Bengali kid, I was like the only Bengali kid in my grade. I knew there were some other Bengali kids in the city, but I think they went to different schools. And in my elementary school, there were some other foreigners, like Egyptian people, but they were not in my grade. So in my grade, I think I was the only non-Japanese person in the entire
Wow.
grade.
Wow.
So it was very, I would say it's very tough in the beginning because when I moved to Japan, I knew Bengali. I didn't know any, Japanese. So like how, like, so I remember, it's kind of hazy, like the memory, because it's been a while, but I
Yeah,
remember like PK that time, I was completely alone in the beginning, but then, when you're young, it's very easy to learn new languages. So I think after like a year or two, I picked up Japanese and then I was able to make some friends and hang out.
I see. So, question. So, do you think you know how after you learn a certain language, you
Yeah.
think in that language? So, was there any point in time where you're thinking in Japanese instead of like maybe Bengali?
I would say, that's a good question. Right now, I feel like usually I think in English, just
Yeah,
because growing up in America and going to school here. But yeah, at that age, I don't remember. I think I was thinking maybe sometimes in Japanese, sometimes in Bengali. I don't
yeah,
remember too much. But yeah, in elementary school, I would say I was. I mean, I was more fluent in Japanese than Bengali. I would say because Bengali I would just speak it at home. I didn't know too much like reading or writing. But
yeah.
Japanese, I was like in school, right? So you had to write everything and read everything in Japanese. So I was more fluent in Japanese back then.
I see. And speaking of like, I know you mentioned like how you would serve food to other the students. So, at Japan, what exactly? How was your diet like as a Bengali in Japan?
Yeah, so since I'm Muslim, we have to
Yeah,
follow like the halal food and all that, and this is
right.
very hard in Japan because in Japanese culture they add like pork to basically everything, like in the food.
I see.
So that was hard. So I remember in elementary school, everyone would eat lunch, and I would most of the time, I mean, I think all of the time, I would just bring lunch from home. So I would pack up some rice and some veggies or stuff like that and eat that. Yeah, as a Muslim or Bengali living in Japan, it was very hard because I remember for like the halal meat and stuff like that, we had to order it like through like a delivery service. So they would ship it from another city, like frozen meat and fish, stuff like that, to our area. Um, but yeah, other than the meat situation, because of halal, it was tough. But I would say vegetables and fish, it was pretty abundant in Japan because Japan has a like a fishing culture because it's an island in the middle of the ocean, so they do a lot of fishing and people eat fish like every day. So it was very easy for us to buy like fresh fish, not Bengali fish because Bengali fish is like from the rivers in Bangladesh, but more of like sea fish, like salmon and stuff like that. So that was a good part of living in Japan.
Got you. I mean, we could talk like this whole podcast can be dedicated to Japan, no? But
Yeah, yeah.
the next thing I want to know is like after Japan, like at what point did you guys decide to leave Japan, and where did you move to after?
Yeah, so after my mom finished her PhD, I think this was around like 2009 ish, when Obama became president. I remember seeing that on the TV.
Yeah,
Um, I we moved to Philadelphia because my mom got an offer to do some research at UPenn, which is in
I see.
Philadelphia.
Yeah,
So after Japan, we moved to UPenn. Sorry, UPenn is the college in Philadelphia, and then we were there for I think 2 years. So
okay.
this was fifth grade and sixth grade. So end of elementary school and beginning of middle school.
And how was it like living in Philadelphia? Did you live in a small town? Did you like live in the main part?
Yeah, we actually lived close to. So Philadelphia has the downtown, which we call Center City, and then outside of that, we have the UPenn campus, which is called University City. I would say we lived in the area we lived in closer to college. It's kind of like Queens, so it's not like Manhattan. It's not like the downtown, but it's like a smaller area between the suburbs and the downtown. So that's the type of place I lived in,
Yeah,
and yeah, it was very new experience for me because there were a lot of Bengalis in that place. I mean,
yeah.
I went from seeing like no Bengalis in Japan to seeing like entire neighborhoods full of Bengali
Well,
people,
yeah.
and it was a great experience. I made a lot of friends, and yeah, it was fun.
That must have been a surreal experience. So
Yeah,
did you
yeah,
have to like learn English again, or like did you have to learn English from scratch, or how was it? How was
yeah.
that process?
So in Japan, we didn't learn English in school. I think you do learn English in Japan, maybe in like high school or something.
I
But
see.
you know, my parents knew English because in Bangladesh the university system is in like English, so they knew some English already. So I remember in Japan while I was in school, like after school, my dad would teach me some English, like words or phrases, and I would watch TV, movies or shows in English. So I knew some English, but like not fluent. So when I came here to Philly, I had to take like the English as a second language class,
Yeah.
and I would say after like 2 or 3 years, I became more fluent in English.
So you became more fluent in English. And how do you think the transition from living in Japan to going to school in America, um, how is that different? Like, how do you think going to school in America was completely different from going to school in Japan?
Yeah, I would say one thing that surprised me was how. So in Japan, I didn't face any like direct racism, I would call it. So in Japan, the culture is basically you have to be polite always in front of people. So even if you hate someone, right, you have to be polite in front of them, but you can like say stuff behind their back. So if someone didn't like me or were racist to me, they would do that behind their backs, never like to
Yeah.
my face. But in the US, it's more like direct. So I remember like I moved here and in my grade, there were some rude kids who called me some, stuff like terrorist or whatever,
Yeah.
because I was a foreigner. And it was a big shock to me because, first of all, in Japan, they would never say that to your face or, do that. But in the US, everyone is like more like bold, I would say, and direct when it comes to interaction. So I had some negative experiences where people called me, racist words and stuff like that to my face. And it was just a big shock to me as a kid.
And what year was this? You said it was like around 2010,
Like
around
fifth
those
grade,
time?
yeah,
So
2010 around.
yeah, so yeah, and because like 9/11 happened just like a decade ago, so the racism is like is
Yeah,
still
yeah,
strong against the Muslim community.
yeah,
Also,
yeah,
like the also the Sikh community because they were the turban. So um, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, and how did you respond to the racism? Like, what did you do to battle it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was tough because, we're a minority. There were a lot of Bengali kids in that community, but in my school, it was mostly like non-Bengalis. There were some Bengalis, but I remember like in my grade, there were like two or three other Bengali kids. The rest is like white, black, or whatever. And
I see.
you know, when I'm sitting in a classroom, I remember this kid called me, you know, Usama or some other like, you know, terrorist or whatever. And then I was like the only Bengali kid in that class. So like, what am I supposed to do? You know, so I don't know. I kind of had an approach where so, you know, in Japan, there's no like fighting culture. Everyone's polite and all that. So I didn't know how to fight. If I knew how to fight, I'd probably, you know, punch that kid because, you know, some of the thing he said was super out of the line. You know, like it's unacceptable to say that to anyone. But I just didn't know how to deal with it, so I'd just be quiet and just try to, you know, just try to forget about it, I guess, and move on.
I see. So that was, I'm guessing, middle school, and
Yeah.
I know, like, I saw your profile. Like, you went to three different high schools in 4 years. Now, why
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, that's interesting. So after Philly, we went to Baltimore. This was end of middle school to beginning of high school. So I think seventh grade, eighth grade, and ninth grade, we were in Baltimore. We were in the suburbs, and my mom got a job at NIH, which is the National Institute of Health. It's a government agency. It's in Baltimore, so that's why we moved there. And then, so my first high school, ninth grade, it was in Baltimore. And then after that, my mom got a new job in Albany, New York, at the Albany Medical Center. So 10th grade, I moved to Albany, and then 11th grade, her professor basically moved to Florida. So like the
Yeah,
research team had to move with the professor to do
I see.
research in Florida. So
I see.
11th grade, I was in Florida. I was in a small town called Gainesville, where University of Florida is. And then 12th grade, my mom decided to come back to Albany, so we came back to Albany, and then yeah, that's we had to move back and forth because of my mom's job.
And there is, you frequently moved around a lot. Moved from Japan to Philly, and then you moved around in high school to different states. So how do you think that affected the way you made friendships as a teenager?
Yeah, I think I was. I always felt left out because every like place I moved to, right, you will see kids who've been there like since they were born there. So I'm sitting in class and there's two kids next to me, right? They've both known each other since they were like a baby because they grew up in the same neighborhood. They went to all the same schools and all that. So I always felt left out because I could never develop like a deep friendship with anyone because you know I was just like a random traveler coming into their town or their high school. So I struggled a lot with friendships in uh, that period. I had some friends, but I would say like it wasn't like any deep type of friendship. You know, like your best friend or something. I'll just have some some friends you joke around with during lunch. You know, something like that. But yeah, it was
Yeah,
hard to make deep bonds and friendships because of all the
I
moving.
see. Just curious. So, this was back in, what, like, I'm guessing around 2013, 2014, back when you were in high school,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So how did the kids talk to each other back then? Like, now kids use Snapchat, Instagram, like TikTok, as social medias. How
yeah.
was the digital communication back then?
Honestly, I would say it hasn't changed that much because I remember 2014 Snapchat came out.
Yeah,
So everyone was using Snapchat. Before that, I think kids were using I think everyone had Instagram back then. I think that started becoming a thing in like 2012, 2013. So everyone would just like DM each other on like Instagram or just normal text, you know, they would just text each other on iMessage. So yeah.
yeah, I see. So, and one thing from our last conversation that I found interesting was that when you went to college, that's when making friends was like a little bit easier compared to previous in your life. And I think a lot of people can relate to that because, when you're in college, it's like you're an adult now and you have a
Yeah.
whole schedule. Like, you have work and then you have classes. So, and high school is way easier to make friends. Um, so how was that college experience for you in America?
Yeah, so actually, college was kind of different for me compared to most kids because for RPI, it's in Troy, New York, but my family lives in a town called Latham, New York, which is closer to Albany. So it's two different towns, right? And most kids who went to college, they came from like faraway places, so they just lived in a dorm. But I was living like 15-minute drive from the school, so I would just commute there. So because of that, I never like lived in a dorm. I just lived with my parents during my undergrad. And that was a different experience because I would just go to class and just come home. While the kids there would usually be there like, you know, like 24/7 because they're living on dorm, they're doing homework at like 3 a.m., going to the library or whatever. So it's a different experience. But I found it easier to make friends because, compared to before where I was moving like every year or every 2 years, I was there for 4 years. So it's easier to, when you're in a major, you take a couple classes with some people and then you take another class with them the next semester and so on. So you kind of develop friendship with people that way because you're with them for 4 years compared to me in high school where I was moving every year. So just because of the extended time frame, it was easier for me to make some friends.
I see. And you were an electrical engineering major, right? At
Yeah.
the RPI. And you said
Yeah.
you took a class in coding class, and then you slowly transitioned over to that. So, um, how did you go from RPI to, I think, what did you do in masters again? It was at Georgia Tech, right?
Yeah, Georgia Tech. Yeah, it was computer and electrical engineering masters.
Yeah. So, how was the process like transitioning from RPI to Georgia Tech? So how was doing your bachelor's maybe a little different from doing your master's at Georgia Tech?
Yeah, it's interesting because in terms of the course load and like the actual degree, I would say master's is generally easier than bachelor's because um, have you finished your undergrad or?
Yeah, I finished my bachelor's.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I think you remember since it's recent for you, but you remember in undergrad when you first take those like classes related to your major in your sophomore and junior year, those like basic classes. For me,
Yeah.
they were pretty hard because it's the first time you're doing it. But then the concentration or elective classes you take near the end of your bachelor's degree, they're kind of easier because you know the basics already. So it's kind of like extending the basics. And master's is kind of like that. It's mostly high level classes that focus on like one area. So for me, I took some AI related classes, so machine learning, deep learning, and I already took some like coding classes and stuff like that in my undergrad, which were very tough for me, like data structures. Because of that, it was easier for me to do those high level classes because I knew the basics already and I was able to overcome that obstacle of learning those basics. So the advanced stuff, I mean, it may seem hard from a distance, but because you know the basics, you kind of just extrapolate and it's easier to learn that way.
So there is a lot of people that finish their bachelor's in computer science and are struggling in the job market to find a job.
Yeah.
So, and they're considering, hey, maybe I should get my master's. What do you think about this?
That was exactly what happened to me, actually.
I see.
So I finished my undergrad 2021, so around COVID time, and I already did like two internships. So I thought I was pretty set to get a job because I mean most people don't even do an internship; they just do like one. So I had two, so I felt pretty confident. But after COVID, I think the job market was just slow and recovering. So I applied to like hundreds of places, but I couldn't even get a job interview. So it's very tough for me. And I decided near the spring of my final semester that since I wasn't even getting an interview, like what should I do next? So I decided to take the GRE and just apply to some master's programs, and that's what happened to me. That's how I got my master's. I just couldn't get a job interview or a job, so I had like no other path but to
I
do
see.
that.
Yeah. So do you think the getting the master's helped you get that tech job?
Yeah, I'd say for me, after I did my master's, because in masters you become more specialized in a certain area,
Yeah.
you are more valuable to the tech companies. So they see that because I think compared to like it's like a pyramid, right? At the bottom you have everyone getting a bachelor's degree and then you have master's degree and then PhD. So as you go up the pyramid and you specialize and learn more, you become more valuable. So I think that definitely helped me land more jobs compared to just my bachelor's degree.
Yeah. And one thing that I found interesting from our last conversation is that you said your high school had a you had to get an internship every summer, right? And that's why you got that internship, right? So, and you were at different high schools.
Oh
So
no, no, not high school, college.
college. Oh, okay, okay. So
Yeah.
your college, they required you to pretty much get an internship every summer. So
Not every summer
I
exactly.
see.
I can talk about that.
Yeah,
So
go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So my school started this new program called Summer Arch. So basically, so you finish your freshman year and then you start your sophomore year, right? This program they would force you to take a semester. So your normal sophomore year semester in the fall or spring, they would force you to take that during the summer. And if you do that, you have your fall or spring semester empty, right? Because you already took those classes. So they force you to take those classes in the summer and then get an internship in the fall or the spring semester of your sophomore year. And I was forced to apply to a bunch of internships because I had to get one. And then after you do the internship, you had to write like a report and send that to the school that you completed a legit internship during that semester. So that kind of forced me to get an internship my sophomore year.
He says, and I want to talk about your transition from high school to college.
Yeah,
So you actually have a pretty impressive SAT score, like you got above a 1500, right? So
yeah.
how did you study for the SAT?
SAT is just kind of like lead code or coding. Just a grind,
Yeah,
I remember just sophomore year, junior year, I was just like after school every day, I would spend like an hour or two just going to like Khan Academy to watch
yeah.
like SAT related, math or English videos. Just watch those videos, and I got like a practice book, and I would just grind like a couple questions every day. Just consistent effort, and I think that helped me a lot because a lot of kids they kind of rush it and they cram before the SATs. But I think SATs it's like cumulative, so it's testing like a lot of stuff you learn in like middle school and high school. So you have to like review and kind of plan and prepare over time to have that knowledge fresh in your memory when you take the exam.
So you pretty much self-studied and got above a 1500. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is,
Interesting.
so when I took the SATs, it was in Florida, and my high school had some very, very smart people. So
I see.
they had a math team, right? And that math team, everyone from that math team either goes to like MIT, Stanford, or Harvard. Like they're elite. I think one of the best in the country.
Mm,
So my school overall had this very like high standard in terms of like education. So I wasn't like the only one self studying. A lot of people were self studying. My
I see.
experience wasn't. I didn't feel very like unique.
I see. So, you know, so we're going back around, bachelor's, high school, and master's. So, at what time did you get your first software engineering internship or job?
Yeah, so this was my sophomore year when I was forced to get the internships
I see.
in that summer rush program. So I spam applied to like hundreds of positions, and it was
Yeah,
very tough because you just finished your freshman year, you have like no internship experience, no engineering experience, no like any experience other than like high school or whatever. And at that point in time, I was doing a double major. I started my double major in both electrical and computer, so I was applying to both. Hardware, electrical engineering type of jobs, and also software, just because I was desperate to get like any jobs. And I remember I got a call back from this company in Albany. It's called Global Foundries. So what they do is they make computer chips. They're kind of like TSMC if you heard of them. And this company, they made the computer chips, and they have a lot of different types of engineers, like chemical engineers and mechanical engineers, because it's like a manufacturing process, right? And the manager who called me from the company, she said that she needed someone who knew Python in her team because all the people in her team are like chemical engineers. They didn't know any like coding, and they really needed someone to like help code this process and automate it. And that's how I landed my first internship. It was for a hardware manufacturing company, but for like a software role.
I see. So, and after the co-op, the software engineering co-op, Global Foundries, um, what was your next tech internship or job?
Yeah, after that, it was my next internship was during COVID, so 2020, and this was with Western Digital. They're a company in Bay Area. They own SanDisk, if you heard of them. They make like
Yeah,
thumb drives and hard drives, stuff like that. So like memory storage. That was an interesting experience because what happened was I was flown out to Bay Area to do the internship or to do the interview for the internship, the final interview. And it was very intimidating because they gave you like a whiteboard, like an actual board, like in a
yeah,
room. And they have a couple engineers and they ask you questions, coding questions, and you have to like write it out like on the whiteboard.
yeah.
And yeah, but somehow I was able to pass that interview and get a job. But then once COVID started, they kind of, I think they laid off or shut down my software engineering team, the team I was
I
supposed
see.
to do an internship with. So
Yeah,
what happened was I was immediately transferred to like this random IT group who do like IT stuff, which wasn't really coding or engineering. It was more of like business stuff. So like the job I did was I think managing like software licenses for the company. So like you check like who's using what software, and you just kind of track the software licenses. So yeah.
And so, I mean, after you did that, 2 years later, you became a software engineer, I think an intern at Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah, go ahead.
so this was once I started my master's degree at Georgia Tech. That's when I got my Amazon internship. Um, so what happened was actually before I got Western Digital, I failed the Amazon interview to get the internship, and that was a big learning experience for me because actually people think once you fail like a job interview at a big tech company, it's over, and that's not true. You'll learn a lot from that interview, and you'll focus on your mistakes so that you'll improve yourself and get the job next time. And I remember failing my Amazon interview. What Amazon does is they ask you a lot of instead of just normal lead code questions, they'll also ask you some special behavior questions. So Amazon has this culture where they have this thing called leadership principles. It's like a bunch of principles that they want all their engineers, business people, executives, everyone to follow. And starts with customer obsession because that's their number one priority at the company. So when you do an Amazon interview and you do the behavior questions, you have to actually use those terms from the leadership principles to answer those questions, and they ask you those questions to see if you did your prep and if you knew about this principle. So this is something important I learned, and it helped me pass the interview next time and get the internship.
I see. And then you also worked at Meta, right? So that was what? That was immediately after Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So what happened was I got the Amazon summer internship, but
yeah,
then I also got an interview from Meta, and I really wanted to work at Meta because it's a cool company. I had some friends who worked there, and one of my friends referred me to that internship actually, and then I got both offers actually. I got the Amazon offer and then the Meta offer. I think similar time frame.
yeah.
So I wanted to do both just to get the experience and work at both companies. So I talked to Amazon and they were able to push their internship from summer to spring. That way I was able to do the Amazon internship during spring and then the Meta internship in the summer.
I see. And then you also now you're just like doing big tech, then another big tech. So and then like the year after that of that internship in 2023, you were a software engineer at Samsung. So how was that like as opposed to like your previous two internships? Because this right now you're no longer an intern. You're doing you're a software engineer full time. So yeah,
Yeah, so I'll talk to you about the work cultures at Meta and Samsung because I interned at Meta and then I worked at Samsung because they were two very different cultures.
yeah,
So what happened was once I joined Meta and I did my internship, I realized that Meta is it's kind of built different from a normal big tech company.
mm,
It's very unique culture. So what Meta does is they'll give you all the support you need, right? They have the best internal tools, I think, for software engineers. So when it comes to pushing code or testing code or releasing code, it's like one click. Like they have all these really cool tools that will do all that work for you. So all you have to focus on is the actual coding and just worry about that, right? And then outside the actual work, they have all these perks, right? They have the office actually feels like a mall because they have like all these like restaurants and cafes with like free food. So they even have like ice cream shops, and they have gyms, personal trainers. I think they also have like an arcade. So it's like a mall. Like it doesn't feel like an
yeah,
office. It's like a super cool place,
yeah,
right? And yeah, they also gave me like a free shuttle. So it's kind of like a school bus. Like there's a bunch of these buses that drive around the Bay Area and just pick up like Meta employees from their neighborhoods, which is pretty cool. And I think no other company provides this amount of like perks and um, benefits, but there's a reason for it. It's because they have a contract, right? This is the social contract at Facebook. They give you all these tools inside work and outside work so that you can be like the best engineer and deliver all the results for them. So their motto is moving fast, which means just move as fast as you can, just focus on coding and just deliver, right? And get an impact. So they want you to be physically at work for like a long time with all these like perks like at the office, but also mentally always be focused on the work. So it's like a culture where it's like you work hard, play hard, but you need to always be focused on the job. But it's very different from other companies because they also make you work hard, but they don't give you like these kind of perks to kind of motivate you. So it's like it's when you say you have a stick and a carrot situation where you use like a carrot to like entice people. It's kind of like that. They have all these perks to encourage you in like a positive way, just so you be like the best engineer you can be and deliver the results. So this is the culture at Meta. Oh yeah, the other thing is it's like a normal American Silicon Valley company, so everything is super open, and there's a lot of like room for engineers from like the bottom to provide input on like strategies on how to do stuff, and they'll listen to your input and they'll value your input. But at Samsung, it was a completely different culture because Samsung, it's a Korean company. I've lived in Japan, so I know like I'm familiar with like the East Asian work culture a little bit. So in Japan, China, and Korea, they have this work culture where it's very rigid and it's like a top-down bureaucracy. So it's like the opposite of Meta and these other big tech companies from Silicon Valley who have like a open culture where they embrace innovation and new ideas. So I worked in their Austin office in Texas, and their HQ is obviously in Korea. So everything we did was just to support the HQ in Korea. So we didn't have much room for input or our own ideas. Everything we had to do, the HQ would tell us, and we just had to listen and just obey and do what they wanted us to do. So this was a big shock for me because in Meta you have this open Silicon Valley culture where it's like a bottoms up culture where engineers from the bottom come up with new ideas and new strategies. But at Samsung, it's like the complete opposite. It comes from like the top, and you just execute what the people at the top tell you to do. And another thing was in terms of perks, they didn't have much compared to Meta and Facebook. It was actually very strict and I would say kind of like careful with everything. So like I remember going into the office, right? And it's like a TSA check at an airport, like no
Mm.
joke. You
Oh,
walk into the office, you gotta take your backpack off and your lunch bag or whatever. You gotta put it in these machines that scan like the stuff, and you gotta walk through like a metal detector, like at the airport, and they check like what do you have, right? And
yeah,
after that, you have to put like your you gotta take your phone out and put like these black stickers on the camera of your phones, both the front camera and the back camera. And like it's just super like just weird to me, right? Coming from this Meta where it's like a mall, the office is like a mall, to like this office in Samsung where it's like super strict and like secretive. They have their reasons. So the Samsung division I worked at was a semiconductor manufacturing facility. It's like TSMC Global Foundries. So they had to make all these chips for like Nvidia and Tesla and these companies. So they had to like protect their secrets. But just the culture difference was like very like a shock to me because of how like careful and strict they were with everything, and how it was like a top down culture where you just listen and obey to your bosses compared to Meta where it was more open ended and yeah.
yeah. It's very interesting because it looks like you go from Japan to America,
Yeah.
and then you go from like high school to college. So it's like a new kind of culture shock every
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
like every new year, right? So after Samsung, looks like you founded a startup, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the experience with starting a startup? What did you learn from that? How did it go overall?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, yeah, I would say since high school, I knew I wanted to be an engineer who made stuff, but I also wanted to be like my own boss in a way. So, like,
Mm, yeah.
make my own business, be like self-sufficient. Because when you work at companies, especially big tech, it's very like the work itself is kind of like granular. So, like, they have all these new softwares they're building and releasing, right? And they have thousands of employees. So each employee, their job is like super, like a small cog in the machine kind of thing. So like your software, you have like a bunch of features. So your job is to work on like super small feature of that software. So it gets kind of boring over time because you're doing like such like granular kind of work instead of like designing and making your own stuff. So I knew since high school I wanted to be someone who had their own company, their own engineering business where they made whatever they wanted to make, something like that. And yeah, in Georgia Tech, I took this interesting class. It was like a startup class where you work on like learning how to do like the business of startups. So startups, it's not just building stuff and engineering; it's also like the business aspect of it, right? So like how to talk to customers, how to do the product iteration cycle, stuff like that. So that was a great help for me. And I decided after Samsung that I would focus my time and effort into trying my own startup and use what I learned from that class. So yeah, I started doing my startup, and I would say after doing it and it not working out, the biggest lesson I learned is just talk to customers. Because so when you do a startup, when you come from a big tech or any job, 9 to 5 job, and you do a startup, the very first culture shock is that you no longer have a boss, right? So you can do like whatever you want. Like you're like the manager of your own resources and time. So you can do whatever you want because you're the only person at the company. You're the company basically, right? So what happens is me and a lot of people who try startups, they get distracted by stuff that's not really important, like talking to investors, or I don't know, like making the website look good or whatever, like because there's so much work you can do and so many directions you can go on that you have this freedom and you kind of get lost in like what to focus on. So I kind of got lost in what to focus on. So I was doing this kind of stuff, like talking to a bunch of investors and things like that, instead of focusing on what's important. And what I learned is the number one thing is just to focus on the customers. And so you need to, well, if I do a startup another time, I decided what I would do first and foremost is talk to 100 customers. So I would talk to 100 customers and I would get their feedback to understand if the problem I'm solving is like an actual problem that they're willing to pay for, right? So as an engineer, it's very hard for us to do that because we love building so much that we end up making like cool stuff, but then no one uses that stuff because we just love building. We never care about like, oh, what's it going to do to the world? Like who's going to use it? Who's going to pay for it? We never care about that. We just so passionate about building stuff that we kind of get lost in that. So I'd say the biggest lesson next time for me is just talking to customers and actually understanding what problem I'm solving.
Right. And looks like you worked there from around 7 months. And at that time, did you have any other job, or were you doing it full time? And did you have did you have the money saved up? Like, how do you support yourself financially while you're running this startup?
Yeah, so this was last year. I moved back from Austin to Albany with my family. So I was living with my family, so I didn't have to pay rent. It's a blessing, because I know a lot of people didn't have that option of living with their family. And in terms of money, I was just using the savings I had for my previous jobs. I didn't have like a side hustle or something like that because I thought that if you do a startup, you got to do it right. You got to focus like everything you have on that startup. So I was trying it full time for a couple months.
I see. And I asked this question to the other people as well. But how do you think the Bengali community views entrepreneurship, like taking risk, running a business?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a very unique thing. So for Bengali culture, I think in terms of business and entrepreneurship, it's kind of weird because if you do a certain type of business, so first of all types of business, whatever you do, have like a risk associated with it, right? But in Bengali culture, there's this culture where if you do a certain type of businesses that other Bengalis have already done, there's like less risk and I would say like stigma, like less like people don't look at you weird if you do it. So for example, it's probably like a stereotype, but gas stations, like a lot of Bengali uncles own gas stations or like what do you call it, like a grocery store, right? And
Yeah.
if you, I mean, all of these businesses have a risk, right? There's like no guarantee that you're going to succeed. But if you try businesses that the Bengali community are already doing, if you try that, then there's like no one cares, like. But then if you try like a new type of business, like a startup, like a tech startup, then everyone's like, oh, like what are you doing? Like just get a normal job and like a stable income. But like if you do a
Yeah.
gas station, you also have a risk of like not succeeding, right? Like there's risk to all businesses, but there's this culture where only certain type of businesses they have like this stigma and like skepticism when you do it. But for other businesses, because other Bengalis already do it, they don't have that for that.
And follow up question. So, how do you think we can promote more entrepreneurship within the Bengali community?
Honestly, I feel like reading about startups and being in the startup world, I feel like entrepreneurship is not something you can encourage. I would say it's like I don't know how to explain it, but like I feel like some people are just more like naturally just more inclined to like take risks and do stuff like entrepreneurship. I don't think it's something you can actually like promote, but I think you could try to promote it, by like what I like that class I took at Georgia Tech regarding startups. I think it's important you educate people on like the risks of startups and some basic information about it, just so they have like some guideline on how to do a startup if they wanted to try it. But other than that, I don't think you can really do too much to promote entrepreneurship.
I see. So after after the startup, right? I think one of the things we talked about in our last call is that you you had customers, but you weren't sure like how to like make them pay, right? Am I diagnosing you right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I'll talk about it.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll explain. So the first idea I had was like a safety app, basically. It'll just
Yeah.
show like crime data for college campuses because when I went to Georgia Tech, I saw that there were a lot of crime happening on campus or near campus, like, bikes getting stolen, cars getting stolen, stuff like that. And normal crime trackers like Citizen, they focus on like the city, not on like the college. So I thought, what if you made like an app focused on like college crime? So like people knew like, what was happening and how to be careful. I did that. So I made an app for Georgia Tech campus using crime data, and I released the app on App Store. And I think I got like 100 downloads or something, but like no one was like returning to the app or like using it again. So what I realized was they just wanted to try like the new app just to see, like what's up with it, but they didn't want to like use it regularly. And that made me realize I wasn't solving a real problem, because if I was solving a real problem, they would come back to that app, right, every day and use that. So that's when I realized that I should have talked to customers and understood their problems instead of just diving into this idea I had and building it.
That was the first app you taught. Was there a second app?
Yeah, I just kind of gave up on that idea after doing some more research. I felt like it just wasn't an actual problem that people wanted to be solved. So the idea I had next was one of my friends. He reached out to me. He had this idea of like, what if we could simplify the interview process for tech interviews and engineering interviews by doing some third party vetting of candidates so that companies could like save money and time. So his idea, I became his co-founder. His idea was that, people like us who have some industry experience, we would interview like new grads and other people and do some like first round vetting, and then we would send them out to like the companies if they're qualified. And we thought this would save the company's time from, doing those initial like phone call interviews and stuff like that. And we tried that, and yeah, we made like a website just to get some, some wait lists, see like, what the sentiment was on the market, see if people were interested in using our service. And we reached out to a couple schools and talked to students, and we got I think like around, again, like 100 people who were interested in using our service, from different schools. People looking for new grad jobs, they wanted to try our service. So we got that wait list. And then we felt that the next step, which was to actually contact the companies and, offer our services to them. So we talked to like so many companies, recruiters, managers, whatever, and they just weren't interested in using our service. And a lot of times they just ignored us. So I don't really know like what the reason was, but if I had to guess, I think it's because each company have like different standards of hiring, so they don't want to like outsource even that first round phone call or introductory interview to other companies.
Mm. And okay, so one of the things I see is that getting your first 10, 100 users. How do you do that as a startup? Like when you're just getting your initial users, how do you find them?
Yeah, I feel like the initial users, it's not that hard. It's getting the paying users, which again comes back to talking to customers and finding an actual problem that's worth solving. But getting those initial users, for my safety app, I just kind of, well, I mean, I had friends at Georgia Tech because I went there, so I told them about it.
Yeah.
So I guess like referrals, that's one way. The other way was I used Reddit to like go to like subreddits for our college and ask there. And also for our job interview service thing, we also tried Reddit because, there's a lot of students on Reddit and young people who use it. So I think that's a good source of getting users.
I see. And so after you after the startup, you started working at IBM, and that's where you're currently working right now as a staff software engineer. So how's your day-to-day job like at IBM?
Yeah, IBM is a it's a unique company compared to even other like American companies because uh, so in terms of the work culture, it's pretty much it's pretty normal, nothing unique about it. It's like you do your job and you go home. But the big difference is there's a lot of decentralization at IBM. So IBM is truly like a global company because, for example, in my team, right, I have like 10, 15 people in my team, and everyone's working in like different states in the US or in different countries like India or Germany. So like in my team, like I'm in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I have some other colleagues here, but most of them are like outside in different states or in different countries. And even my own manager and boss, my manager is in like Mexico, and then her manager is in Arizona. So there's like this big like decentralization happening at IBM where everyone is working in different places. So a challenge we have is communication. So because of that, we have to schedule meetings and a lot of meetings at like weird times just so we could like communicate effectively between the different areas.
I see. So, um, I know we covered like you living in Japan and then you coming to America, coming to Philly, and then your experience in high school, and a little bit about getting your bachelor's, getting your master's. And one thing I forgot that we want to cover was you living in Albany, right? So
Yeah.
you live upstate. So how is living in upstate as a Bengali different from living in New York City?
Yeah. So Albany, it's like the Albany is the state capital of New York. So there's actually a big Bengali community here. A lot of them work for the state government. Like my dad. My dad works for the New York State government as like a mechanical engineer. So there are a lot of people like that who move to Albany just for like the state government jobs. And so there's a big community here. I think there's like I'm probably making up a number, but I want to say like 3,000 to 5,000 Bengalis in Albany, probably.
Yeah,
And yeah, and also recently, I think after COVID, a lot of people are moving upstate from New York City or just that general area, like New York City, Long Island, Queens, just because I think housing prices it's cheaper here than in New York City. So a lot of Bengalis are moving up here.
yeah, I see. And so let's see. So you lived in Philadelphia, lived in Baltimore, you lived in Albany, and you also lived in Florida,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so now you have lived in across many different places, right? You lived in Japan, and have you ever went to Bangladesh?
Yeah, I've been to Bangladesh. My family, we try to go every year during the
Yeah,
summer or around Eid time.
right.
Uh, yeah.
So, and how is your experience in Bangladesh as compared to like living in a really densely populated Bengali region, like maybe Hillside, Jackson Heights, or something like that?
Really, really what?
So, how is your experience living in Bangladesh as opposed to living in a really densely populated Bengali
Oh,
region? Yeah,
yeah. I don't know. One thing, when I feel good when I go to Bangladesh is that you're no longer a minority. Like you're like
yeah,
a normal guy, and
I
I don't know.
see.
That's all. That always makes me happy. Like I no longer have to have this like, uh, like thinking about your identity. Because
Yeah,
in America, when you're living in America, when you walk around, you always think of like you always see someone and you think, oh, I'm not like a normal American. Like you see like a black person or a white person or whatever, you feel like minority. But in Bangladesh, you step out at the airport and you see like everyone looks like you. So like
I
um,
see.
yeah,
Makes
I
sense.
think you said compared to like a densely populated area in
In
here.
like, let's say Jackson Heights or like
Yeah,
Hillside.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, honestly, Bangladesh, it's like if they saw Jackson Heights, they wouldn't consider it densely populated because
yeah, I guess.
like the
Yeah,
crowds in Bangladesh and how
yeah,
like super dense everything is, and you go outside to like a neighborhood and you just walk down the street in Bangladesh, even at like at night or whatever, when there shouldn't be that many. There's always people just hanging out, just chilling or whatever, and yeah, I think it's just more the culture there. It's like a 24/7 type of culture where everyone's always like hanging out and chilling. Yeah, I'd say it's more dense than Jackson Heights or areas in the US, but other than that, it's yeah.
so as we're wrapping up, questions about maybe the future, like So what's next? What's your future goals for your career?
Yeah, my future goals as a career, I don't have anything concrete right now, but I just started IBM 3 months ago in November. So I had a pretty hectic last year. I was like last, I think April, I was at Samsung in Austin, Texas, and then I moved to Albany, and then I did my startup, and then now I joined IBM, and I just had to move to Poughkeepsie last month. So it's been kind of hectic. So I don't have much career goals, like anything concrete in my mind so far. I just trying to learn as much as I can, and just grow as an engineer at IBM. In terms of other goals, I do have a goal. So I love food, and I've
Yeah,
been eating out a lot, especially since COVID, just ordering out and gain some weight. So I'm trying to lose some weight.
I see.
I always went to the gym to like lift, but I never did any cardio. So I'm trying to do some more cardio, like swimming and biking or tennis, stuff like that.
I see. Yeah. Good luck on your like the with the weight loss goal, right? Weight
Yeah,
loss goal, right? That's what you're
yeah.
trying to guess. Yeah. So last thing is, because we're almost at the end of the podcast, is there any message you have for anybody that's watching this right now?
Yeah. You mean
Like, let's
like
say that,
watching it or?
yeah, yeah. So anybody who's watching this podcast right now, maybe it's like a Bengali kid, maybe it's like, what advice do you have for them, or what message do you
Yeah.
have?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like I saw some of my friends suffer this, but I feel like many Bengalis, especially when they're growing up in high school, middle school, they have like this kind of like an inferiority complex when it comes to their culture between the American culture and the Bengali culture. So there's some people they completely like abandon their Bengali identity and just become like a average American basically, and I've seen that happen, and I feel like that's sad because the way I see it is that there should always be some balance. So there are some parts of Bengali culture and identity that's actually that we excel at and we should be proud of. For example, and I think we do better than like in American culture. So for some aspects, for example, education, like we really focus on education and doing good in school compared to other cultures. And also Bengali people were very family oriented. Like we're always, uh, we value spending time with our family as much as we can compared to other cultures, which are very good things. So I think what we should do is we should celebrate and keep and not abandon those parts of our culture that are good. And also in regards to American culture, there's a lot of parts that are like very good. For example, American culture is very good at risk taking and trying new things. That's why we have all these like startups in like Silicon Valley. So what we should do is we should take good from each culture, American culture and Bengali culture, and just take the good from each, and then do that instead of abandoning one culture or feeling inferior complex or something like that. We should just take good from each culture and just balance it out.
Yeah, and that's a very strong, powerful message with accepting your identity, and that's something that is going to be relatable to a lot of the audience. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, and I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a good hour. Thanks so much.
yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right, so,
All right. So I'm like.
walaikum assalam.